The storm didn't just fall that Christmas night. It stalked the land like something hungry. Out on that white-drowned road, a black rancher stood alone, coat whipped sideways, breath slicing through the cold, watching a young Apache woman try to keep two half-frozen children alive with nothing but her shawl and the last pieces of her strength. No crying, no shouting, just the wind, and the sound of three small lives slipping away inch by inch. Anyone watching would have said they were too late, that the West had already chosen who would live and who would get buried by morning. But the rancher stepped forward anyway, not because he was brave, but because the girl whispered something no dying person should ever have had to say. Take them, not me. That was the part that broke him. That was the part no one sees coming. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from, friend. Follow this story all the way to the end, and don't forget to subscribe for more Western tales. Arizona Territory, winter of 1879. She should have died 10 minutes ago. That was the truth the storm kept whispering as it slashed across her face. Thin, sharp, merciless. The Apache girl staggered through the white darkness with a child on each arm, feet numb, breath hitching so hard she couldn't tell if she was choking on cold or fear. Snow tore at her shawl. Blood, hers, not the children's, darkened the fringe where rope had rubbed her raw. Every step was a prayer falling apart. Just one more, she rasped. The boy at her right, older, jaw clenched against shivering, kept dragging her sleeve, half guiding, half pulling. The little girl in her left arm had stopped crying 2 miles back. Too cold for tears now. Only the faint jingle of a tiny bell tied to her wrist told Tala she was still alive. Then the wind shifted. Hoofbeats. Not thunderous, slow, heavy, measured. She froze. Shoulders coiled, breath held, body turning sideways to shield the children, even though she had nothing left to fight with. For a heartbeat, the storm seemed to kneel around her, waiting. A lantern cut through the white. A man rode out of the dark, broad-shouldered, coat stiff with frost, hat rimmed in snow. The horse moved steady beneath him, like it trusted the cold more than the man did. He reined in when he saw the 3 shapes in the drift. He didn't speak first, didn't reach, didn't announce his name like a lawman would. He just looked, really looked, at the rope burns on her wrists, the shaking boy, the limp little girl with the bell. And something in his face tightened, the way a door shuts against a bitter wind. Tala's knees buckled. No, please, don't send us back. The boy tried to stand in front of her, but his legs gave too. He went down on one hand, teeth bared at the stranger like a cornered cub. The man swung off the horse. Easy, he said. One word, low, steady, dangerous only to whoever had hurt them. He knelt in the snow. The storm hissed around them. Tala forced her eyes up. She saw a black man, mid-30s, scar under one eye, jaw rough with days of grief he hadn't slept off. His breath smoked in front of him as he studied the children, then her, then whatever horror he read in the tracks behind them. You walk out here alone? He asked. No choice, she whispered. Someone after you? A man who says we belong to him. Her voice cracked. By law, by God. Something flickered in the man's eyes. A memory, a wound, a promise. He eased the girl from Tala's arms, checking her pulse with practiced gentleness. Then he pulled his coat wide and tucked both children against his chest, like they'd always had a place there. You did good keeping them alive, he murmured. Tala swayed. If you help us, they'll come for you. Let 'em come. Those 3 words, soft as a prayer, hard as a vow, carried more weight than the storm. He shifted, lifting her with one arm like she weighed no more than a blanket. My name's Sol, he said. Sol Carter. She blinked at him, stunned he'd offer a name before asking hers. Why would you help? Because God didn't put you in my path for me to walk on by. The horse stamped, ready to move. Sol positioned Tala in the saddle, pulled the kids under his coat, and mounted behind her, arms braced around all 3 to shield them from the wind. Hold on, he told her. She tried. Her fingers barely obeyed. The mare pushed into the blizzard, hooves muffled by snow. Tala looked back once. Through the swirl of white, she thought she saw figures far off, shadows crossing the ridge, too many for the storm to swallow. Sol, her voice trembled. They're close. I know. The horse climbed the rise toward the dark outline of a ranch house. One chimney smoking, one lantern burning like a small defiance against the world. Sol leaned in, voice almost lost to the wind. No child freezes on my land, he whispered. Not on Christmas, not while I still draw breath. And somewhere behind them, the shadows on the ridge stopped, as if counting how far they'd gone. The ranch house came into view like a stubborn ember refusing to die in the storm. One room, one chimney, one old barn leaning into the wind like an exhausted mule. To most men, it would have looked small, insignificant. To Tala, barely conscious, it looked like a miracle God whispered into the snow. Sol swung down first. The wind shoved at him, but he moved with the kind of steadiness only men who've carried grief too long ever learn. He lifted the children from the saddle, Noah stiff as a fence post, Lila limp as a ribbon, and helped Tala slide down. Her legs didn't hold. They buckled the moment they touched ground. Sol caught her under the arms before she hit the snow. You're safe, he muttered. Door's only 10 steps. 10. She blinked like the number didn't mean anything anymore. 10, he repeated, half guiding, half carrying her. We'll make everyone. He pushed the door open with his shoulder. Warmth didn't exactly pour out. Sol wasn't a man who spared wood. But compared to the storm, it felt like stepping into heaven's foyer. The room smelled of coffee long gone bitter, pine smoke, and the faint dust of a man who lived alone because life had taught him to expect too little. Sol set the children near the hearth, laying Lila on a folded blanket. The tiny bell on her wrist chimed weakly. Noah dropped beside her, glaring at Sol like he still hadn't decided if the rancher was salvation or another kind of threat. Sol didn't blame him. Boys who'd been hunted didn't trust shadows, much less full-grown men. He handed Noah his canteen. Small sips. Noah hesitated, then obeyed. The boy's throat worked as he swallowed, eyes never leaving Sol's. Tala stood just inside the doorway, shivering hard enough that her teeth knocked. Snow melted down her hair in thin streaks. When Sol stepped toward her, she flinched, not from him, but from the memory of other men who reached with different intentions. Sol noticed, and he stopped where he was. "Sit near the fire," he said quietly. "I'll get water warm enough not to shock you." She didn't move. "Is it allowed?" she whispered. Sol's jaw tightened. Something about the question carved into him deeper than the wind outside. "Ma'am," he said, voice low with a sharp kind of gentleness, "anyone who walks into my house gets treated like a person, not a burden, not property. A person." Tala blinked. The word person hit harder than heat. She sank near the fire, hands curled around her arms for warmth, watching the children with a gaze that hurt to look at. Half fear, half fierce devotion. Sol poured hot water into a tin cup, mixed in a pinch of salt, slid it to her. "Drink slow. Storm took more out of you than you think." She obeyed, coughing on the first swallow. Sol crouched beside her, close enough to help, far enough not to crowd. After a moment, Tala whispered, "You should have left us. Out there." Sol didn't answer right away. He tended the fire instead, the glow painting hard lines across his face. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of something older than the storm. "I don't leave children to freeze," he said. "Not on Christmas. Not ever." Tala shut her eyes. Relief hurt almost as much as exhaustion. Noah suddenly muttered, "They'll come. Soon." Sol looked at him. "Who?" The boy's jaw flexed. "Men with torches. With guns. They followed us from the canyon. They said Lila was worth money. That Tala was too." Tala's hands clenched. Her breath shuddered out. She couldn't speak. Sol stood slowly, as if a new truth had been nailed into place inside him. He walked to the rifle hanging by the door, but he didn't grab it. Instead, he looked at Tala. "I ain't asking for every detail," he said. "Not tonight. No one bleeds out stories on my floor unless they want to." Tala lowered her head. A strand of wet hair fell across her cheek. "But," Sol continued, "if danger's comin', I need to know what kind, what they want, how many." Tala's shoulders tightened. "Enough to break doors." Her voice was almost soundless. "And a sheriff who doesn't care if children scream." Noah added, He said she belongs to him, by law." Sol's hands curled at his sides. Not fists, just the slow, steady rise of a man deciding something important. "This house has laws of its own," he said. He looked at the children, then at Tala, then at the storm clawing at the window. "First rule," he said, voice low but fierce. "No one touches a child under my roof." He stepped closer to Tala, not touching, not overstepping, just letting the firelight show the truth in his eyes. "Second rule, you ain't property, not to him, not to any man breathing." Tala's breath hitched. She bowed her head, as if words that simple were heavier than hunger. Sol turned toward the window, watching night gather in the snow. "And the third rule," he said. The flames crackled. The storm answered. "No lies when danger's at the door." Behind him, the tiny bell on Lila's wrist chimed again. Faint, trembling, like a warning only the desperate ever hear. The fire had begun to settle, burning low and steady, the way a man breathes after outrunning death by a few steps. The storm outside hammered the shutters, but inside the small cabin, the world seemed to pause, hushed, watchful, waiting for something to break. Tala sat close to the hearth, arms around her ribs, not from the cold anymore, but from the memory of it. Noah stayed beside Lila, one hand on the little girl's blanket, the other gripping the canteen like a weapon he barely trusted. Sol moved with quiet purpose, putting the kettle back, shaking snow from his coat, checking the latch on the door twice. A man didn't survive the frontier by being careless, not when shadows were counting footsteps out there. Tala watched him, not with suspicion now, but with something else, something that made her throat tighten. He'd brought them in without asking price. He'd given warmth without demanding story. And he'd drawn a line around the children like it was a sacred thing. Men like that were rare. Too rare. When Sol finally turned toward her, Tala gathered herself, pushing up from the hearth. Her legs trembled once before settling. "Sir?" Her voice came soft, frayed at the edges. "I need to say something." Sol paused halfway to the table. "Go on." She glanced at Noah, stern little jaw, fierce eyes, trying to look braver than his shaking hands allowed. Then she looked at Lila, breathing light, bell on her wrist chiming with every weak shift of her arm. Tala swallowed hard. If it's too dangerous for you to keep all of us," her breath caught, "you can send me away." Sol's brow creased. Tala lifted a hand quickly, a plea. Just let the children stay. Let them sleep by your fire. They won't cause trouble. Noah can work for food. Lila, she doesn't cry anymore." Her voice cracked softly. "But I can go. I can run again. If someone must be turned out, let it be me." Noah jerked upright. "Tala, no!" She hushed him with a touch to his shoulder. "You'll be safe here. That's what matters." Sol didn't move, didn't blink. His silence felt heavier than a slammed door. Tala pressed on, voice shaking but steady enough to be heard. "You helped us because it was Christmas. I don't want that kindness to kill you. If they follow our tracks here, they'll burn this house to cinders. They'll shoot your horse. They'll drag all of us into the snow and call it lawful." She drew a trembling breath. I've been running since dawn. I can keep running. Just, please, keep them warm. The boy stared at her like she'd just torn his world in half. Sol finally stepped closer, not looming, not crowding, just enough to stand between her and the fear she was willing to shoulder. "You think I'd put you out there alone," he murmured, "after what I saw tonight?" Tala lowered her gaze. "They'll hurt you for keeping us. They'll try." His voice carried the steadiness of a man who'd already made peace with certain battles. "But listen to me, Tala." She hesitated. He waited until she looked up. "I don't take in children and throw out the one person keeping them alep." His words were stone, solid, undeniable. "You walk out that door again, you die. Snow will finish what those men started." She shook her head. "Better me than—" "No." Just one word, but it landed like a hammer. Tala's breath wavered. The room blurred around the edges. "I don't want to bring ruin to your house." Sol exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand across his jaw. "This house has seen more ruin than you know. But nobody survives out there tonight. Not you. Not those little ones." His eyes softened, barely, but enough to cut through the dark. "And I ain't about to let you decide your life's worth less than theirs." Tala blinked, stunned by the way he said life, not body, not use, not property. The fire snapped, the wind screamed, and for the first time that night, Tala felt heat settle in her chest instead of cold. Noah muttered, voice small but fierce, "We stay together." Lila shifted under the blanket, her bell chiming like a fragile amen. Sol nodded once. Decision carved deep. "Then it's settled," he said. "Nobody leaves. Not you. Not them, not tonight." Tala closed her eyes. A tear slid down, quick and shameful, disappearing into the soot on her cheek. She tried to wipe it with the back of her hand, but Sol spoke again, softer this time. "You asked for them first." A beat. "Good mothers do that." Tala's breath hitched. "I'm not—" "You are," he interrupted quietly. "By choice." The words unraveled something inside her she didn't know was still tied. Behind them, the storm clawed at the windows again, harder this time, as if angered by the warmth inside. And far out in the dark, something answered. A voice. A shout swallowed by the wind. Close. And coming closer. Sol woke before the fire did. Years of lonely mornings had taught his body to rise at the faintest change in the air. And tonight, the change came sharp, like a nail dragged across the back of his neck. He sat up on the cot, boots already halfway on before he realized why his breath felt heavier. The cabin was too quiet. The storm had eased, leaving only the soft crackle of dying embers and the thin, tired bell on Lila's wrist chiming when she shifted in sleep. Tala lay near the hearth, arms around both children, her face still drawn with exhaustion. She looked younger without fear carved into her features. Sol didn't wake them. He moved for the door instead. The cold hit him the moment he cracked it open, sharp, bitter, clinging. But it wasn't the cold that made him step fully outside. Tracks, fresh ones. He crouched low, fingers brushing the snow the way a preacher touches scripture. Careful, reverent, searching for truth. The prince circled wide around the ranch, not heading toward the door, but studying it, measuring it, counting distance. Boot heels, 3 pairs, maybe 4, and one deeper print, the kind made by men who don't care how loud they walk, because fear does the quieting for them. Sol's jaw tightened. These weren't drifting travelers. These weren't neighbors. These were hunters. He stood slowly, scanning the ridge. Dawn hadn't broken yet, but a faint line of bruised light bled into the sky. Long enough for men to hide. Long enough for men to watch. A soft creak behind him. Tala stood in the doorway, shawl pulled tight, breath fogging the air. "What is it?" she whispered. Sol didn't soften the truth. Tracks. Fresh. Her fingers clenched the wood frame. From them? Looks that way. She stepped outside fully before she realized she was barefoot on snow, but she didn't flinch at the cold. Only fear moved her. How close? Sol pointed to the ridge. Close enough they can see the chimney smoke. Her face drained of what little color it had regained. "They found us," she murmured. "No," Sol said. "Not yet. But they will." He walked past her, kneeling beside the prince again. Tala followed him with her eyes, a tremor running through her shoulders. "Sheriff Rourke?" she asked quietly. "Maybe." Sol touched the deeper print again. "But this," he shook his head, "this looks like a man who lets others do the scouting." Tala's breath stalled. Her throat moved once, hard, painful, before she managed to speak. Crow. The name was barely sound. Worn, wounded, hollow. Something in Sol stopped moving altogether. He didn't know Crow yet. Not fully. But he knew men like him. Men who used God's name the way other men used chains. Tala wrapped her arms around herself, as if speaking the name alone brought the memory back. The torches, the shouting, the righteous fury of a man who believed he could own whatever his hand closed around. "He won't stop," she said. "He'll burn everything to force us out." Sol rose. "He'll try." "You don't understand." There was no pride in her voice now, only terror sharpened to honesty. Crow doesn't care about the law. Sheriff Rourke does whatever he says. They take what they want and call it salvation. They'll kill you for helping us. They'll kill Noah. They'll take Lila. Tala. Sol's voice cut clean through her panic. She looked up at him, eyes bright with fear. "You told me last night you ran out of choices. I heard you. But we ain't out of choices now." He nodded toward the tracks. "This tells me one thing. They're looking. That means they don't have you yet. As long as they don't have you, we move first." Her breath came fast. "Move where?" "To town," Sol said. "For medicine, supplies, tools." Tala's eyes widened. To town? In daylight? The light's the best shield we've got. He spoke it plainly, the way men tell the truth even when it hurts. Darkness belongs to hunters. Daylight belongs to God. She shook her head. They'll see us. Good, Sol answered. Let 'em see who you're with. Let 'em see who's watching back. Tala's lips parted. The idea sounded impossible, dangerous, reckless, but also right. Inside the cabin, Lila stirred. Noah coughed weakly. The bell tinkled, a tiny, fragile sound that didn't belong to fear. Sol glanced at the children, then back at Tala. We need medicine, he said. We need tools. We need a reason to stand in that street with our heads high. And we need it before these tracks become bodies at the door. Tala pressed a hand to her chest, settling the storm inside her. Then she nodded, small but real. Tell me what to do. Sol stepped past her, into the cabin, his silhouette framed by the weak glow of the fire. Pack what you got, he said. Day breaks in an hour. Outside, the snow glinted faintly over the prints, but not enough to cover them. Not enough to hide the men who had already chosen which door they'd break first. They left before the sun fully claimed the snow. The storm had died sometime after dawn, leaving a thin crust of ice across the yard, hard, brittle, shining like glass laid over a wound. Sol led the mare out first, checking the cinch, checking the rifle, checking the horizon. Everything about his movements said one thing. He expected trouble, and he expected it soon. Tala followed with Noah close behind her, carrying Lila bundled tight to her chest. The girl's tiny bell barely made a sound now, muffled by the blanket, but every faint chime tightened something inside Sol. Bells weren't supposed to sound like last breaths. Up you go, Sol said quietly. He lifted Tala onto the saddle, then settled the children in front of her, wrapping the thick coat around all three. Noah's fingers clutched the leather horn like he'd fall into the snow and disappear if he let go. Sol, Tala whispered, are you sure about this? No, he said. Then, but it's what we've got. He swung up behind them and nudged the mare forward. The ranch shrank behind them. One chimney, one stubborn roofline, one small island of warmth swallowed by miles of frozen white. Tala kept her eyes fixed forward, afraid to watch safety disappear behind her. The road into Stillwater stretched long and narrow through the valley, flanked by cottonwoods heavy with frost. Every hoofbeat echoed too loudly. Every gust of wind felt like breath on the back of their necks. Halfway down the trail, Tala stiffened. There, she whispered. On the ridge. Sol didn't turn his head. Only his eyes shifted. A silhouette. Tall. Still. Watching. Not riding. Not approaching. Just watching. Keep looking forward, Sol murmured. They want fear first. Tala obeyed, though her pulse beat so hard she wondered if the man on the ridge could hear it. When the first rooftops of Stillwater came into view, something clenched in her stomach. Towns meant safety for some, judgment for others. For her, they had always meant both. The main street was already busy, ranch hands unloading feed, a woman sweeping frost off the saloon porch, the blacksmith hammering at a shoe. Ordinary life. Ordinary noise. But ordinary eyes had a way of turning sharp when they saw something out of place. And Tala, an Apache girl riding double with a black rancher, clutching two half-frozen children, was more out of place than a wolf among sheep. Conversation thinned, bootsteps slowed, men straightened. Sol kept riding. His spine didn't bend, his gaze didn't waver, his pace didn't falter, as if daylight itself were his shield. "Don't look down," he told Tala. "I'm not," she whispered. But she wanted to. God, she wanted to. 3 women on the porch of the mercantile stared openly. One man outside the saloon spat tobacco and muttered something under his breath. Noah stiffened. Lila whimpered softly. Sol's voice dropped deeper. Eyes on the doctor's sign. They reached the hitching post near the apothecary. Sol dismounted, lifted the children down first, then offered Tala a steady hand. She hesitated only a second before taking it. Inside, the shop smelled of liniment, dried herbs, and old floorboards. Mrs. Greeley, the apothecary's widow, looked up from her ledger. "Sol Carter," she said, eyebrow arching. "Didn't expect to see you bring company." Sol didn't waste time. "I need fever powder, bandages, honey, willow bark tincture. Enough for 3. Mrs. Greeley's gaze slid to Tala, her shawl, her bruised wrists, her trembling mouth, then to the children. "Oh, oh dear." The widow reached beneath the counter without another word. "I'll get the tincture warmed. The little one's lips are blue." While Mrs. Greeley prepared the medicine, Sol went to the back shelves. Tala stayed near the children, head lowered, trying to make herself small. But whispers seeped through the walls like smoke. "That Crow girl, ain't she? Sheriff's been lookin' since last night. Sol's bringin' trouble home." Tala flinched. Noah braced in front of Lila, like the words themselves were weapons. Sol heard it. He set down the jar he was holding. "Tala," he said quietly, "look at me." She did. "You walk out of this store with your head up. Understand? I don't want to make things worse." "You didn't," Sol said. "They did." Before she could answer, the shop door creaked open. Boots stepped inside, measured, heavy. Tala froze. Mrs. Greeley froze. Even Noah's breath stopped. Sol turned slightly, enough to put himself between the children and the door. A deputy stood there, badge catching the light, eyes cold and curious. "Well now," he drawled. "Sheriff Rourke been asking about a woman and 2 young'uns matching that description." His gaze slid to Tala. "Looks like I just got lucky." Tala's fingers gripped the counter. Sol didn't move, didn't speak, didn't blink. The deputy smiled. "Sheriff'll be mighty pleased to know where they are." Behind Sol, the tiny bell on Lila's wrist gave a soft, trembling chime. a sound that didn't belong in a place where wolves wore badges. The deputy didn't step aside. He lingered in the doorway like a man who enjoyed blocking exits. Tala edged back, pulling Noah with her. Sol shifted slightly, his frame cutting the deputy's line of sight to the children without looking like he was doing it on purpose. "Where are they?" the deputy asked again, though his eyes already told him he knew. "Sheriff Rourke'll want 'em brought in. Sooner the better." Mrs. Greeley swallowed, hands twisting in her apron. "Now, Deputy Ames, these young'uns are—" "Didn't ask you, ma'am," Ames snapped. Sol's voice cut in, quiet as a knife sliding out of leather. "They're under my care." Ames's mouth twitched. "Your care? Sol, you know better. These three belong to Crow by law. Sheriff's just doing his duty." Sol didn't blink. "Children don't belong to anybody." Ames smirked. "You'll have to take that up with the sheriff. He's headed this way now." The bell above the shop door jingled again, soft, innocent, out of place. Then Sheriff Rourke stepped inside. Rourke had the kind of face that lied kindly. Lines shaped by smiling too much at the wrong people. A Bible verse stitched on his coat collar. A badge polished brighter than his conscience. Well, the sheriff drawled. "Morning, Sol. Folks said you rode into town early. Didn't realize you brought guests." Tala stiffened. Her hands trembled, but not from cold. This was a tremor born from memory. Rourke tipped his hat toward her. "Ma'am." She didn't answer. He smiled wider, the kind of smile a snake might give before swallowing something small. "You gave us all quite a scare, you know, running off with Crow's little ones like that. Thought we might find you frozen stiff in a ditch." Sol's jaw flexed. "You talk too easy for a man accusing her of something he ain't proved." Rourke's eyes glinted. "I got paperwork says those two children are under Crow's guardianship. That puts 'em under my jurisdiction." He leaned slightly, like he wanted Tala to feel the weight of every syllable. "So if I say they come with me, they come with me." Tala reached instinctively for Lila. Noah stepped in front of her, tiny shoulders hardening like a shield. Sol didn't have to tell him. His body moved before his mind caught up. Sol stood straighter. "Let's see the papers." Rourke blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." The sheriff laughed softly. "Sol, this ain't how things are done." "It is in my house," Sol said. Ames stepped forward. "You forget yourself, Carter." "No." Sol's gaze pinned both men in place. "I remember exactly who I am." Rourke's smile thinned. "You want the papers? Fine. I'll bring 'em. Tonight. At your ranch." He tapped the counter with a gloved finger. "And I expect my property to be ready to leave when I arrive." Sol's voice dropped. "They're not property." Rourke's eyes cooled. "Law says otherwise." Sol took a long, steady breath. One of those breaths men take right before choosing whether to end a fight or start one. He didn't draw. He didn't shout. He simply placed himself fully between the sheriff and Tala. "Then bring the law," he said. "Not your arrogance, not your lies, not your threats. Bring the law. in daylight. Rourke studied him, the smile slipping just enough to show the truth underneath. Irritation and fear. Then he turned. "Ames," Rourke said. "Let's go." The deputy hesitated, looked at Sol, looked at Tala, looked at the children. Something ugly slithered across his face. Disgust, envy, hunger. But he obeyed the sheriff and stepped aside. Rourke paused in the doorway. "One last thing, Sol," he said. "Crow's a patient man, but not when you steal from him." His gaze flicked to Tala. "I'd think hard before you set yourself against a man favored by God." Sol's answer came low, even, unshakable. "God don't favor men who take children." The sheriff's expression froze in place for half a breath. Then he walked out. Ames followed, boots crunching on melting snow. Silence settled in their wake, the thick, waiting kind that falls right before the ground splits open. Mrs. Greeley exhaled. "Lord help us," she whispered. "Sol, you just picked a fight you can't win." Sol didn't look away from the doorway. No, Crow did, the moment he laid hands on a child. Tala pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Her pulse hammered in her throat. Noah leaned into her side, trying to look brave even as he shook. And Lila's tiny bell jingled, soft, scared, as if it understood exactly what kind of night waited for all of them. The ride back to the ranch was quieter than any storm. Tala held the children close, every jolt of the trail feeling like a warning. Sol rode behind them, jaw locked, eyes fixed on the line of trees like he expected Rourke himself to step out with a warrant made of gunpowder. They didn't speak. Words would have broken the fragile thread holding the four of them together. But Noah kept glancing back. Not at the road, not at the trees, at Sol. The boy's brows pinched deeper each time he looked, like he was trying to remember something, and the remembering hurt. When the cabin finally came into view, smoke still rising from the chimney, Tala breathed out as if she'd been holding the world inside her lungs. Sol dismounted, helped them down, checked the yard with a quick, trained sweep. No new tracks, no disturbed snow, no movement on the ridge. For now, they were alone. Inside, Sol stoked the fire and set the medicines on the table. Tala laid Lila on the cot, rubbing her tiny hands until color returned. Noah stood watch again, not at the door this time, but between Tala and the rest of the room, as if guarding her from ghosts only he could see. Sol poured warm water and slid it toward him. "Drink." Noah didn't take it. He was staring at Sol's face. Not the way a boy looks at a stranger, but the way someone stares at a memory coming back wrong. "Something on your mind?" Sol asked. Noah swallowed. His voice, when it finally came, was small and cracked. "Did you ever fix a wagon wheel outside Red Mesa?" Sol blinked. The question hit him like a stray bullet. Unexpected, sharp, carrying a story he hadn't touched in years. "Years back," Sol said slowly. "Maybe." Noah's fingers twisted in his shirt. Was it a woman crying beside the road? A white woman with 2 children in the back. Tala looked at Noah sharply. Noah. But he kept going, words tumbling out now, frightened and certain and trembling all at once. There was a man yelling at her, said she wasn't fast enough, said God made him head of the house and she was bleeding. His breath hitched. A man rode up, a black man, told the shouting man to step away, or he'd step in. Sol stood very still. I remember your voice, Noah whispered. You said, kids don't learn right from fear. The room went quiet. Even the embers seemed to hold their breath. Sol exhaled once, long and heavy. That was a long time ago, son. Noah's eyes shone, not with tears, but with something older, something like recognition, something like hope fighting its way through years of hurt. You helped us, the boy whispered. You helped my mama. Tala touched Noah's shoulder gently, as though steadying him. Noah. But Noah shook his head. It's him, Tala. I know it is. Tala turned to Sol, searching his face, searching his silence. Is it true? She asked softly. Sol didn't like talking about it. The memory carried its own scars, ones he didn't wear on skin. But he didn't lie. Not in his house. Not when danger was at the door. Yes, he said quietly. I remember that day. What happened after? Noah's voice trembled. Sol's jaw tightened. Your mama drove off fast as she could. I didn't see her again. Noah looked down. The room blurred around the edges. She died that winter. Tala's breath caught. Noah. The boy wiped his nose with the back of his hand. She always said, the man who stood up for us was proof good people were real. She told me, if I ever felt lost, look for someone who spoke like that. He lifted his gaze to Sol, frail, fierce, pleading. And you speak just like him. Sol swallowed hard. Something old, something buried, pressed against his ribs. You saved us once, Noah said. Don't let them take us now. Tala felt her heart fracture, first in fear, then in gratitude so sharp it almost hurt. Sol crouched down in front of the boy, eyes level. You listen to me, he said softly. Nobody's taken you. Not while I'm standing. Noah nodded, lip trembling. Tala touched Sol's shoulder, barely, like she wasn't sure she had the right. You didn't have to tell him the truth. Sol stood. He earned it. He looked at both children, then at Tala, who watched him with something new behind her eyes. Not trust, not yet, but something close enough to hurt. Outside, the wind rose again, short, sharp, deliberate. Not a storm, not nature, a signal. Someone on the ridge testing how close they could get before being seen. Night fell fast. The kind of night that didn't bother with moonlight or mercy. Just darkness, thick, heavy, pressing against the cabin walls like a living thing. Sol checked every window twice, every latch 3 times. then doused the lamp so only the faint breath of the hearth lit the room. Tala held Lila close on the cot, rocking her gently even though the little girl had already slipped into exhausted sleep. Noah stayed by the door again, small body stiff with the instinct of a child who'd had to grow into a lookout long before he grew into a man. Sol watched him. Boys weren't meant to be sentries. But tonight he didn't argue. The first sound came low, a soft crunch of snow somewhere beyond the barn. Tala's head jerked up. Noah's breath caught. Sol moved to the window and froze. Lanterns. 3, no, 4. Moving slow, fanning out. Not neighbors. Not riders passing through. A formation. He exhaled through his teeth. They're here. Tala's fingers clamped around the cot's edge. Crow? Not yet, Sol murmured. But men who take orders from him. Another lantern lit up the far side of the yard. Then a harsh voice bellowed, "Sol Carter, sheriff wants a word." Noah flinched. Tala pulled him close. Sol stepped back from the window. They want me outside where they can surround me. Don't go, Tala whispered. I have to, he said. If I don't walk out, they'll claim I'm hiding stolen property, and then they'll break the door. They'll break it anyway, Tala breathed. Sol looked at her, really looked. Fear in her eyes, yes. But behind it was something fiercer. The will to protect the 2 children she'd chosen long before she'd chosen her own safety. I'm not giving you up, he said. Before Tala could answer, a second shout cut through the night. Bring out the Apache woman and the kids! Sheriff's orders! The wind carried the words straight into the cabin. Even the fire seemed to shrink. Noah trembled. They know we're here. Let 'em know, Sol muttered. He grabbed his coat, then stopped, halfway to the door, his gaze falling on Tala. You get to choose, he said quietly. Stay hidden or stand with me. Tala lifted her chin. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't had a moment to breathe since the canyon. But something in her steadied. They won't stop, she said. Not until they have us. Then we face them in the open, Sol answered, where the whole night can see what they are. Tala rose from the cot, shifting Lila into her arms. Noah stepped to her side, jaw set in a fierce line no child should ever have to wear. The pounding on the door came next. One heavy fist, then another. Carter, last call! Sol unbarred the door. The cold rushed in like accusation. 4 men stood in the yard. 2 deputies. 1 hired gun with a scar across his cheek. And behind them, Sheriff Rourke. Lantern in hand, smile slick as oil. Well now, the sheriff said. Evening, Sol. Thought we'd finish our talk. Sol stepped outside, closing the door behind him just enough to shield the children from view. You were invited, Sol said, voice low. Didn't invite your army. Rourke shrugged. Precaution. Crow has rights, after all. You mean papers forged in a back room? Rourke's smile soured. Careful, Sol. You don't want to insult a God-fearing man. I ain't seen him fear God a day in his life. The deputies shifted, hands on holsters. Rourke tilted his head. Bring him out. No, Sol said. Rourke blinked once. No? You heard me. The sheriff's voice thinned. Law says those children belong to Crow. Law also says a man can't take what he never cared for, Sol replied. Crow cared plenty, Rourke snapped. Crow cared for owning them. The sheriff stepped closer, lantern swinging hard enough to throw wild shadows across Sol's face. You're making this worse on yourself, Rourke hissed. You think those kids are your burden? They ain't. And that woman, she's stolen property. She'll be corrected. You... The cabin door opened behind Sol. Tala stepped out, snow at her feet, firelight behind her, Lila in her arms, Noah clinging to her shawl. Her voice broke the night. I'm not property. The words silenced the yard. Even the wind seemed stunned. Rourke stared at her. Ma'am, this ain't your place to speak. Then why are you trying to silence me? Tala shot back, voice trembling but sharp as glass. Sol moved to stand beside her. You heard her. Rourke's smile slipped away. You folks are making a holy mistake, he said. His eyes flicked to the ridge behind them, almost nervous, almost too nervous. Sol noticed. Tala noticed. Something else was coming. Something darker than lanterns and badges. The silence that followed Rourke's threat cut deeper than any shout. Snow drifted between them, soft as ash, as if the sky itself didn't want to witness what came next. Tala stood rigid, every muscle pulled tight beneath the worn shawl. Sol stayed at her side, shoulders squared, a wall made of burnt grief and stubborn faith. Noah pressed close to her hip. Lila stirred, whimpering softly against Tala's chest. Rourke's lantern swayed, throwing long, warped shadows across the yard. Last time I asked polite, he said. Bring them out. Sol didn't move. Neither did Tala. The sheriff's smile wavered. You really think one man can stand against Crow? Think he won't burn this little shack to the ground? Tala's breath buckled, not from fear of fire, from fear of truth. She gripped Lila tighter, and the tremor in her hands grew until even Noah noticed. Auntie, Noah whispered. The word pierced her. Noah rarely used it. He preferred Tala, equal and plain. But fear made children reach for the names that made promises. Tala, Sol murmured, seeing the shift in her eyes. What's wrong? She swallowed hard. Once, twice. Then her voice, thin, breaking, escaped her. They're not mine. Sol stiffened. Noah's head snapped upward. Even the deputies stopped shifting their weight. Tala closed her eyes as if bracing for judgment. They're not my children, she whispered. The wind caught the words and tore them apart. Noah stumbled back a step, as though someone had kicked the ground out from under him. Whoa, what? Tala reached for him, but he flinched. Not in anger, just shock too heavy for his small frame. I found them, she said. Found them on the trail 5 months ago. Their mother died a mile from the canyon. Their father, her throat closed. Crow called him a sinner for protecting them. He made an example of him. Sol's jaw clenched, hard. Rourke's smile slithered back. See? Even she admits. Shut up, Sol growled, low enough to shake frost from the rafters. Tala kept going. The truth poured out like a wound finally splitting open. I tried to walk away, she said. I wasn't looking for children. I was just trying to survive. Her eyes shone with something deeper than pain. But Lila reached for my hair. And Noah. He stood between me and Crow's men, even though he could barely lift a stick. Noah blinked quickly, face twisting, too many emotions hitting at once. I couldn't leave them, Tala whispered. So I took them, ran with them, taught them to hide, taught them to be silent when torches passed. I'm not their blood, but I chose them. And Crow wants them back because he wants everything broken he can use. Lila whimpered again. Tala soothed her gently, though her hands trembled so hard she could barely hold the blanket. Noah stared at her like he didn't know whether to cry or hold his breath. Tala, he whispered. She sank to her knees in the snow. I'm sorry, Noah. I didn't mean to lie. I didn't know how to tell you without taking the last bit of safety you had. Noah looked down at his small, shaking hands. So, I don't belong to you? Tala's breath cracked in half. You belong to who you choose, Noah. He lifted his head, eyes glossy. Then I choose you. The words hit Sol like a bullet. It hurt, but in a way that proved the world still had some mercy left. Tala covered her mouth, tears freezing before they fell. Even Rourke faltered. Sol knelt beside the boy, one steady hand on his shoulder. Blood don't make a family, Sol said softly. Choice does. Noah wiped his face with the back of his arm. Then we're a family. Tala nodded, trembling. Yes, Noah. If you want, we are. For a moment, just a moment, the cold didn't matter. Then Rourke shattered it. That's touching, he sneered, but it don't change a damn thing. Those kids are Crow's by right. And now that we know she stole 'em. Sol rose, slow, controlled, a man shaping his rage into something useful. No, Sol said. She saved them. Law says, your law, Sol snapped. Not God's, not mine. Rourke opened his mouth, then stopped, because Sol stepped forward, blocking every path to Tala and the children, his frame casting a shadow long enough to swallow the sheriff's lantern glow. You want them? Sol said. Bring your papers. Bring your lies. Bring Crow himself. His voice dropped to a growl meant for wolves and worse. But you won't cross my threshold tonight. Rourke glared, breath steaming, hatred rising like heat off a forge. This ain't over, he hissed. Sol didn't answer. He didn't have to, because at that moment, from the ridge, a single gunshot cracked through the night, not aimed at them. A signal. Crow was coming. They reached Stillwater before the church bell finished its first toll. Sol didn't want to bring Tala and the children into town again. Not after last time. Not after the tracks around his ranch proved just how close Crow's men were willing to stand in the dark. But Crow's signal shot left him no choice. "If they want to play law," Sol said, "then we make 'em show it in daylight." He didn't mention the real reason. The church steps were the only place in Stillwater where even the sheriff hesitated to lie too loudly. Tala carried Lila under her shawl. Noah walked between them, trying to look braver than his shaking legs allowed. Sol stayed ahead, carving a path through morning frost and hostile stares. People gathered fast, crowd first, then whispers, then a murmur thick enough to choke on. "That's her. Crow's Apache thief. And the children? Saul Carter's lost his mind." Tala kept her eyes down, but Noah didn't. The boy stared straight at every man who looked at him too long, jaw tight, ready to break before he bent. Sol didn't tell him to stop. There was no shame in a child holding his ground. When they reached the church steps, Sheriff Rourke was already there. Badge polished, coat buttoned, hair slicked. He looked like a man preparing for a wedding, not a confrontation. In his hand was a folded document. "Morning," Rourke called, voice dripping honey. "Glad you decided to be reasonable." Sol didn't climb the steps. He stood at the bottom, eye level with the sheriff's arrogance. "Show it," Sol said. Rourke raised both brows. "Patience now. I'll present the paperwork proper, in front of witnesses." He gestured grandly. "We all want the truth, don't we?" Tala's breath quivered. Lila whimpered. Noah gripped her shawl. Rourke unfolded the paper slowly, theatrically, like a preacher opening scripture. "This here," he announced, "is Crow's legal claim to both children. Guardianship signed, notarized, upheld by county law." He held it high for the crowd. A few men nodded. A few muttered amen. Some crossed their arms, liking what they saw too much. Tala whispered, "It's a lie. I never saw." "Quiet," Rourke snapped. "You forfeited the right to speak when you took what wasn't yours." Sol stepped 1 inch closer. Rourke smirked wider. "Careful, Carter. Interfering with lawful guardianship will land you in irons." Sol didn't look at the sheriff. He looked at the paper. "Where's the signature?" he asked. Rourke tapped the bottom line. "Right here." Sol's jaw hardened. He didn't need to be a lawyer to recognize a signature written by a man who'd never held a shaking pen while dying. "Crow's wife been dead 3 years," Sol said quietly. "Who signed for her?" A gasp flickered through the crowd. Rourke froze for half a heartbeat, but half was enough. Tala's eyes widened. She stared at the signature like it was a knife, aimed at the children. Rourke recovered fast. "The mother signed before she passed." "No," Noah said suddenly, his voice cut like a whip. "She couldn't write." Silence dropped heavy. Rourke turned slowly. "What did you say, boy?" Noah stepped forward. His small hands balled into fists. "She didn't write. She marked with an X. Crow made fun of her for it." A murmur spread like wildfire. Rourke's smile cracked, not broken, but strained at the edges. You accusing the law of forgery, son? Before Noah could speak, another voice rose. I am. Everyone turned. It was Reverend Eli stepping out from behind the church doors. His face was pale but firm, his Bible held tight like a witness rather than a weapon. I baptized that woman myself, he said. She never learned her letters. That paperwork is false. Rourke's face drained of color. Reverend, he barked, you keep out of this now. No, Eli answered. God's house stands for truth, not Crow's convenience. The sheriff's composure snapped. Damn fool preacher. And then, Amos, the scarred hired gun standing beside him, shoved the sheriff's arm aside. Enough talk, Amos growled. He reached for Tala. Crow wants the kids now. Tala recoiled. Sol's hand shot out faster than thought, grabbing Amos's wrist. Take it back, Sol said, voice low, deadly calm. Amos sneered. Or what? Sol twisted. Quick, sharp, practiced. Amos hit the steps with a cry. The crowd surged, shocked. Rourke lunged for his gun, but Sol was already moving, placing himself between Tala and every badge, every gun, every lie. Papers are fake, Sol said. Witness says so. Boy says so. I say so. Rourke spat. Crow won't stand for this. He shouldn't, Sol murmured, 'cause I won't either. A hush fell, a dangerous one. Because at that moment, from the far end of town, a single rider appeared. Dark coat, dark hat, horse black as sin. Crow. Come to collect what he believed belonged to him. The rider didn't slow. Crow came down the main street like a plague with a saddle, long coat snapping behind him, horse kicking frost into sparks. His eyes never left the church steps. Not the sheriff, not the crowd. Only the children. Fear hit Tala so hard her knees buckled. Noah grabbed her sleeve. Lila whimpered, burying her face deeper into the shawl. Sol stepped forward, blocking all three from Crow's view. Rourke puffed his chest, trying to reclaim authority he'd already lost. Crow, they're resisting the law. Carter assaulted my man. The woman admits. Crow didn't even look at him. He dismounted like a man stepping down from the gallows he'd built for someone else. You brought them to church, Crow said, voice low, voice wrong. You thought daylight would save you? Sol didn't answer. Crow's gaze drifted past Sol, toward Tala, toward the bundle in her arms. His lips curled. They're mine. Tala flinched backward. Sol's palm brushed her arm, steady, grounding, a promise stronger than the sheriff's badge. Crow lifted his hand. Two of his hired men appeared from the crowd, moving like shadows cut loose. Take the kids, Crow ordered. The command hadn't even finished echoing when Sol moved. Not a shout, not a warning, just motion, clean, fast, final. His fist cracked against the first man's jaw. The second reached for Noah and caught Sol's boot instead, driving him into the dirt. Snow burst around them like smoke. The crowd scattered. Rourke yelled, half drawing his gun but not firing. Too many eyes, too much daylight, too much scripture behind him. Crow snarled, "Get them!" And then a single shot cracked the air. Not from Sol, not from Crow. From Amos, the hired gun Sol had thrown earlier. His gun smoked. His aim was sloppy. His conscience shook his hand. The bullet hit the church pillar, inches above Tala's head. Screams erupted. Lila cried. Noah threw his arms around her. Tala shielded both with her own body. Sol grabbed Amos by the coat and slammed him into the steps. "You fire near a child again." I didn't see," Amos stammered. "Exactly," Sol growled. "You never see." Crow's face twisted. Not fear, fury. "You think you can stand between me and what's mine?" "They ain't yours," Sol said. "Never were." Crow stepped closer, coat brushing the snow. "You can't win this. You don't have the law. You don't have the town. You don't have the numbers." Sol's eyes stayed steady. "I don't need numbers." Crow snarled to his men, "Take them and run." The first rider lunged for Tala, and Sol fired. One clean shot. Not to kill, to stop. The bullet tore into the man's shoulder, spinning him out of the saddle and dropping him in the snow. The gunshot echoed like a warning through the valley. The crowd froze. Every eye on Sol. Every finger itching on a trigger. Rourke screamed, "Carter, drop the gun!" Sol didn't. He glanced once, just once at Tala. Her breath fogged the air in shivers. Her arms tightened around the children. This wasn't a battle they could win here. "Move," Sol said to Tala. "What?" she whispered. "Move." She understood instantly. Sol grabbed Noah by the collar, shoved him toward the alley. Tala followed, clutching Lila. The three of them bolted down the narrow gap between buildings, slipping on ice, dodging shouting men. Crow roared, "After them!" Rourke hesitated, legality crumbling under chaos. Then Chase too. Stillwater became a maze of panic. Slammed doors, shattering glass, horses rearing, townsfolk yelling half-truths and whole fears. Sol led them through the back alleys, past the blacksmith's yard, past the feed store, past barrels stacked like barricades. A stray bullet clipped the edge of a water trough, spray flying like shards. "Noah, down!" Sol barked. The boy dropped instantly. Tala dove beside him, shielding Lila. Sol returned a warning shot, forcing Crow's men to duck behind the saloon. "You can't run forever, Carter," Crow's voice echoed. Sol didn't answer. Running wasn't the plan. Survival was. Mrs. Hattie, the saloon owner, burst out the back door, pistol drawn. "In here!" Sol shoved Tala and the children inside. Hattie slammed the door, bolted it, shoved a chair under the handle. "You just lit the whole damn town on fire," she hissed. "Good," Sol said. "Fire draws eyes." Hattie peeked through the shutter. "They're searching everywhere. Sheriff's lost control. Crow's men ain't listening to him no more." Tala held Lila tighter. "What do we do?" Sol's breath was steady, but his eyes burned. "We stop running," he said. "We get home, and we end this where I can see the ground under my feet." Hattie pointed toward the rear stable, Horse out back. Take it. I'll stall him. Why? Tala whispered. Hattie looked at the children, at their fear, their exhaustion, their tiny hands. Because Crow's the kind of man who shouldn't raise anything, not even the dead. Sol nodded. Thank you. They moved fast, through the back door, across the yard, into the cold again. Sol lifted Noah onto the fresh horse, helped Tala mount with Lila in her arms, then swung up behind them. He kicked once. The horse shot forward, away from town, away from the fire, toward the ranch, toward whatever waited there. Behind them, Crow's men regrouped. Rourke shouted orders no one cared to follow, and the church bell rang again. Not for worship, but for war. The ranch came into view like a bad dream waiting to finish what the night had started. Sol slowed the horse at the ridge, breath rising in thin white streams. Tala tightened her arms around Lila, whispering a prayer against the child's hair. Noah leaned forward over the saddle horn, eyes wide, jaw locked the way boys do when they're trying not to be afraid. But even Noah couldn't pretend tonight. Lanterns burned across the yard, far too many for ranch hands. Shadows moved like wolves. Men kicked through the snow in tight patterns, searching, circling, positioning. The cabin door hung crooked, half-splintered. Smoke curled from a torch held too close to the eaves. They're already here, Tala breathed. Sol said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence spoke the truth clear as scripture. The last line had been crossed. He angled the reins. Hold on. The horse leapt forward, down the slope, through the bitter night, toward the men who believed they could own children. Gunfire erupted first, sharp, frantic, poorly aimed. Sol dropped from the saddle before the horse even slowed. His boots hit the snow hard. He rolled behind the water trough, firing once, twice, clean shots that forced Crow's men to scatter. Tala, off, Sol barked. She slid down, gripping Lila tight. Noah scrambled after her, nearly falling in the snow. Together they sprinted behind the wagon near the porch. Sol didn't look away until he saw them safely tucked behind cover. Crow stepped from the shadows like a prophet of ruin. His coat whipped in the cold. His eyes burned with the kind of fury men use to disguise fear. You should have stayed in town, Crow said. You'd have died quicker. Sol rose from behind the trough. You want the kids? A breath. Then come earn 'em. Crow's lips twisted. Law's on my side. You keep saying that, Sol answered. Like repeating a lie makes it holy. Crow nodded, and two riders emerged from the dark with torches. Burn the cabin, Crow snapped. Smoke 'em out. One torchlighter stepped forward, and Sol's gun cracked. The torch flew from the man's hand, spiraling into the snow. Smoke hissed upward like a dying serpent. I don't miss, Sol said evenly. Crow's jaw tightened. Neither do I. He lifted his hand. A signal. From the far corner of the barn, a lone figure stepped into the lantern glow. Long coat, low hat, gun already drawn but trembling. Tala's voice broke. Who is that? Sol knew. The moment he saw the man's stance, the shame in his shoulders, the way he avoided Sol's eyes, he knew. Eli, Sol breathed. The witness. The man who'd notarized Crow's forged papers. A ranch hand Sol had once trusted, shared fence lines, coffee, and grief with. Crow sneered. Thought you'd like the man who sealed your fate to be the one to finish the job. Tala gasped. Noah clung tighter to her coat. Sol stepped forward, gun lowered but not holstered. Eli, did you sign those papers? Eli's hand trembled around the gun. I had to, Sol. Crow, he said he'd... Don't, Sol said, voice a low warning. Don't blame him for the thing your own hands did. Eli blinked, tears pooling. His voice cracked. I didn't want to pull this gun. Then don't, Crow snapped. Shoot him! Eli flinched, but didn't fire. Sol stepped closer. Look at me, and decide what man you want to be when the sun comes up. Eli's eyes squeezed shut. The barrel of his gun dipped lower, lower, until it pointed at the snow. Crow roared. Coward! He went for his own gun. This time Sol moved first. The shot echoed across the ranch, clean, powerful, final. Crow's gun spun out of his grip, clattering across the frozen ground. He staggered, shouting in rage, not pain. Around him, his hired men hesitated. Some lowered their weapons, some backed away. Some suddenly remembered they weren't paid enough to die for another man's sin. Rourke burst from the tree line then, face red, badge shining, breath steaming. Crow, he barked, stand down. But Crow wasn't a man who understood commands. He lunged, not at Sol, but toward the wagon, toward Tala, toward the children. No, Tala cried, turning her body to shield both kids. Lila screamed. Noah threw himself in front of her. Sol didn't think, didn't aim, didn't pray. He ran. His shoulder slammed into Crow mid-lunge. They crashed into the snow, rolling, fists and knees and curses breaking through the night. Crow clawed at Sol's face, reaching for a knife hidden in his coat. But Sol pinned him, wrenching the blade free and throwing it aside. Crow thrashed, spitting, choking on hatred. You're dead, Carter! You hear me? Dead! Sol's voice stayed calm, almost gentle. Justice ain't yours. He tightened his grip, just enough to break Crow's fight, not his bones. And it ain't mine. It belongs to the truth. Rourke finally found his courage. Get irons on him. Two deputies dragged Crow away, screaming scripture twisted into threats, kicking like a man whose world was finally being taken back from him. Amos dropped his gun and fled into the dark. Eli sank to his knees, sobbing into his hands. Crow's men scattered. Only the four at the heart of it remained. Tala stared at Sol, breath trembling. Snow clung to her hair. Lila whimpered in her arms. Noah stepped forward, chest heaving. Sol breathed hard, but his eyes were steady. It's done. Noah swallowed. Sol, what happens now? Sol looked at him, really looked. A boy shaped by loss, clinging to the last adult who didn't break him. This house ain't much, Sol said, but it's yours if you want it. Noah didn't hesitate. I want it. Tala looked down, holding Lila closer. Her voice was barely a whisper. "And us?" Sol wiped blood from his brow. "Thought that was clear." He walked to the porch, lifted the small brass bell Noah had found on the trail, Lila's bell, and hung it above the door frame, where the early light of dawn would catch it. Tala stepped beside him. "What does it mean?" Sol touched the bell gently. "It means whoever passes through this door ain't property, ain't alone, and ain't ever gonna be hunted again." Wind stirred. The bell chimed once, bright, small, brave. Behind them, the first hint of sunrise touched the snow. A new day, a new house, a new kind of family. Chosen, not chained.